Yes, another shameless plug. Alright. Okay, here we go. I'm going to further discuss the install of the Ecotrons fuel injection kit for the DR650. I've already done a lot of work, but I'm going to show you what I did. Anyway, first is the actual EFI unit. Place it right here. Works pretty well mounted to the inside of the fender. I got a screw here and a screw here. This is the main connector for the wiring harness. I have it routed going up right next to the air filter and the rectifier, coming up right out here through behind the battery. I have most of the sensor connectors going this way, and I have the power connectors going this way. Let me show you the harness itself. Okay, here's the main harness. That's connected to the ECU. I had it coming up by the rectifier to the battery. These are all the connectors I had headed to the rear of the bike through here. And over here is the all the wiring harness that run to the sensors, and this is the O2 sensor. Okay, so basically after you get the loom running up to here, I ran the wires for the sensors this way. Here's the map sensor plug. Plugs right into here. This is the fuel injector. Up here is the fuel injector plug. Here's the throttle position sensor. This connector here is really folded over. I don't know if you can see it. It comes very close to the frame rail. There's not a whole lot you can do about it. You can try to cut that down a little bit. It's just the rubber housing that's folded over like that, and the wiring. I didn't bother too much with it. I just let it fold over. Should be fine. And here's another plug down here. For the life of me, I can't remember what this is. Here's where I have the cylinder head temperature lead connected to the valve cover. You can choose several points for this, but it seemed like a good place for me. Right over here, if you can see that, is where I've got that little white hose coming out of there. That's the intake air temperature. I just used a soldering iron and melted a hole in there and then glued that sensor in there just so it's in the air path. Over on this side, this is the belt crank for the throttle body, and this is the problem with the rear brake reservoir I was mentioning too in part one. You have to step this out. I bent the tab, which gave it enough clearance to move that out, and so there was no interference. You need to basically the carburetor is a dual carb setup, or dual throttle cable setup. You need to disconnect it up here. Right here I took one of the cables out. The one that had the most adjustment on it is the one I kept. Make sure it's the one that draws so that the throttle pulls the belt crank. You mount it here. There's not a whole lot of room where this goes. You can see it runs right by the oil line here, and I have it running up and secured against the main frame rail backbone. I bundled all my connectors in here, tried to make it as clean as possible for the cable routing. As I mentioned, I've separated the loom, and I have the power wires and relay wires running to the rear of the bike across here. This is the fuel pump relay where I've mounted used to be a side stand relay here, but I took that off. The old relay for the side stand has a switch on power that I used, and I soldered that to the the pink wire from the Ecotrons harness with a plug connector. This orange wire is a CKP wire. That stands for crank position sensor. I have it going into a waterproof connector here. That orange wire is supposed to plug into the green wire on the Suzuki loom coming from the crank. be sure you do it to the green. The instructions actually have it reversed. The blue wire is actually the ground wire. So you would attach the green wire to the blue wire here. Okay, here's the fuse for the 12 volt plus. I have the 12 volt plus coming mounted to the top here of the starter relay. You can mount it to the battery if you wish, but I prefer not to have too many connectors on the battery. They can get shorted if you remove it. Here's the negative fuse box for the ground. Oh, the ground I have connected here. This is where my ground, I've scraped this clean and plugged my ground lines there. Here's the RS-232 cable that you would plug into your computer. I've got it mounted to the rear. I have my computer usually mounted in the back. The harness does come with a performance eco switch. This doesn't give you much room to mount this thing. I have a different switch mounted up here. Right here I wired a switch and have it running down. You can mount this wherever you'd like, or do what I did and mount it up on the handlebar where it should be. Many of the ideas like this have come from MX Rob and all the other fellows, Pro Cycle at drriders.com. Okay, for my O2 sensor, I ran the wire up here and around here and left the connector right here. My O2 bung I welded right here. This is 5 inches. You're not supposed to have the bung welded any more than 5 inches from the header pipe. This is a narrowband O2 sensor, by the way, and I have it run as close as I can to the frame. I want it on the side of the frame. I don't want anything on this side of the frame. I don't want anything on this side of the frame to hit it. Hopefully, any rocks thrown up. Okay, over here, this is where the little fuel pump I've mounted to the cross rail on the frame. This is a great place to locate it. It's got the 2 power connectors come off here. There's a little one and a big one. The big one is the blue wire, which is the positive side. The little one is the ground side. I have that running up across the frame rail here and over into my bundle up there. The high pressure line comes off this side. There are 2 lines on this side, but one of them is blocked off. It's actually a little difficult to tell which is which on the little fuel pump. The medium side fuel pump only has an inlet and an outlet. Over on the other side, there are 2 lines coming off of it. Let's see if I can show those. Kind of difficult. It's not really great. Now, in there, if you can see it, there are 2. One of them is the fuel inlet side, and the other one is called the bubble side, and it goes back, the bubble side runs up, is this line here I've got, runs up into the T for the fuel return line. Okay, this is the fuel inlet side, which I barely see over there, but it runs down to the bigger, the 2 fittings on that side of the pump. One of them has a larger hole than the other one. The fuel inlet side is the larger hole of the 2. I have quick disconnects. I've also modified my fuel petcock. I'll show you that in a minute. Here you can see the Ecotrons petcock mounted to my fuel tank and how it comes kind of close to the head and interferes. My design started with a block of aluminum, triangular shape. I drilled two holes for mounting, as seen here. I then drilled 2 more holes. One is the inlet, and I put a fine mesh screen on that instead of a filter. And there's also the outlet side, or return line that goes back to the tank. That's just a copper or steel tubing. It's protruding up about 3.5 inches. I used barbed pipe fittings and drilled and tapped them to get into the inlet and return lines. But if I were to do this again, I would use a different type of fitting, as maybe like the one shown up in the upper right. It was far too difficult to drill and tap. The tap was too long and I couldn't get the threads to go all the way down, so it was very difficult doing it that way. Once I mounted my Petcock and I had all the tubing run, I found that I didn't really have enough room to have both quick connectors to the rear, so as seen in the next slide, I reversed them. This will all depend on how you rig your lines. Here you see the Petcock mounted on my bike. This is just one way you could do it. There's plenty of ways you could do it. Ecotrons is working on another Petcock better design, one that's 90 degrees. The advantage of this one is it's low profile. It stays quite a distance from the head. So anyway, you're welcome to use whatever design you like. And that's it for now. I'm going to sign off and I'll be back for my next installation video.